want to see. You know, as a general rule, Charlie, Larry, I'd be interested in, I mean, I think that as a general rule, whatever the dividing line in a primary is, the candidate who usually wins these presidential primaries, I've been covering them since '84, is the one who can assemble the broadest base of support in the party, who can reach out most beyond their own lane. It happened somewhat less in '08, where it was just almost a numbers thing, where Obama's groups were slightly bigger than Hillary's. But usually, you have the candidate who can kind of go beyond their comfort zone is the strongest one. And right now, if you look at the frontrunners in the Republican field, or what had been the frontrunners, Romney has a lot of trouble going downscale. Huckabee and Palin have a lot of trouble going upscale. So who is going to be able to kind of reach out to all wings of the party, at least somewhat? You know, and I think that person will win. But I do also, I mean, we do not have an example, I do not think, of someone not winning Iowa or New Hampshire and being the nominee of the Republican Party. We have it with Clinton in the Democratic Party, but I think that, you know, the race does tend to narrow very quickly, and this sequence of Iowa and New Hampshire splitting because they are so different demographically, and then South Carolina kind of adjudicating, has been a pretty powerful 1, 2, 3 sequence for Republicans for 30 years now.
I mean, I think McCain won last time, not in Florida, but I think McCain won in South Carolina last time, because he proved he was not just a New Hampshire candidate, and he proved he could win in the South, and he proved he could win among the establishment Republicans. And I think that's what sealed it.
Let's take a couple of questions from the audience. The word is question, not speech. The distinction is 15 seconds is a question, 60 seconds is a speech. So do we have a question? Yes, sir. Mormon issue is the question.
Charlie.
Well, you know, I think that it's a little bit of a problem for Governor Romney and maybe for Governor Huntsman in Iowa and South Carolina. But it's not a big enough problem that they can't assemble enough votes to win either of those primaries. It's certainly not an issue whatsoever in the general election.
Anybody else?
I agree.
Other question? Yes, sir, back there. What happens if Florida bumps up their primary?
Well, that's a good question, because then it becomes Katie bar the door for states moving early. Briefly, the new RNC rules provide that 4 states can go in February: Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, which don't discount Nevada because Romney is very strong there. Iowa, but yeah, the nominee will have to win Iowa or New Hampshire. Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina can go in February. Then nobody can go in April if they wanted, until April, if they want to do a winner-take-all primary, which is sort of our tradition in most states. They can hold a primary in March, but if they do, they have to award the delegates proportionally, like the Democrats do. So that's less attractive to state parties. That said, Florida is currently scheduled by statute for January 25th. The legislative leaders say they want to have an early primary. They may move it into the first or second week of February. Well, as you know, New Hampshire must go by law a week ahead of anybody else's primary, and then Iowa will go, you know, 4 to 7 days earlier than that. And so, you know, we could end up with another, you know, I'm not complaining, but I did not enjoy spending New Year's Eve and New Year's Day in Iowa and New Hampshire, respectively, because we had the damn Iowa caucuses on the 3rd and the New Hampshire primary on January 7th. I mean, McCain was the de facto nominee before we campaigned anywhere there wasn't snow on the ground, including South Carolina.
I think Florida is a bit of a sort of back of the envelope, but I think Florida, you have to consider would benefit a candidate with deep pockets, because Florida is a paid media state. And so if you're a Romney, for example, or a Huntsman or a Barber that you assume will have significant cash at that point, then, you know, they would be strong because they can really get on the air across all those media markets in Florida. And it's not a grassroots state, it's not a caucus state, so I think that would benefit those guys. Charlie made a point, though, that I should have, in my earlier spiel about Nevada, because we've sort of been underselling Nevada. You know, Harry Reid got Nevada in the game in '08, and they've stayed this time around, and they're going to be one of the first 4, at least according to the RNC rules. I think Romney could alleviate his South Carolina problem, and I think he will try and do this, by trying to portray a victory in Nevada as roughly equivalent to what has been always the sort of South Carolina rule. He tried that last time around. His line, I'm sure you guys will recall this, he was talking about gold and silver medals, and Romney was sort of touting, I got a silver again, and it sort of became a joke among the press corps about Romney touting his silvers because, I mean, obviously you want to get gold to get the nomination, but he kept getting these silvers. You know, that's going to be a question, I think, at the time of perception, but is winning Nevada going to be able to sort of muddy the waters from a potential loss in South Carolina? I don't know if that's the case because, you know, Nevada is sort of a new kid on the block. Ron, what do you think?
I was thinking, I think that part of the reality we're dealing with is also just the intensification of coverage of all of this, and the fact that we have gone from what used to be called the invisible primary into something that's really more like a national audition, where the idea that Iowa or New Hampshire voters exist in some state independent and sequestered from what is happening in the whole country is really broken down. I mean, I feel like there used to be this, you know, it was under the dome. It used to be like under the dome was the image, and now the dome is very porous. And, you know, would you rather have X state senator in New Hampshire endorse you, or would you rather have a good night on Sean Hannity if you're a Republican at this point? I think 30 years ago, you know, the calculation would have been different. So if you put a big state in the middle, right in the middle, like if you put Florida 5 days after New Hampshire, all you're doing is making New Hampshire more powerful, because there is not enough television advertising to, I think, reverse the tsunami that comes out of New Hampshire. I mean, especially in the modern era. I mean, where the media is so powerful. You know, with time, if you have time to kind of campaign and drive a news cycle, maybe. But when you put a big state after a small state, I think all you do is compound the influence of the small state.
Well, it would if Florida goes early, it changes the strategy and planning of all the campaigns. But what Ron just said is exactly right. The news coverage, the debates are very, very important in the Republican nominating process, and a lot of voters watch them because of cable TV. Yeah. I mean, look, if television advertising was decisive anymore, McCain never would have been the nominee. Yeah. Romney outspent us 7-1 down the primary count.
Right, it was all based upon, you know, winning in New Hampshire, boom, you go to South Carolina, and then Florida, you get the endorsements from Chris Mel Martinez over the weekend. But it was not just that, that was part of the sort of snowball, right?
Yeah, Romney was tough in Florida because he'd been advertising heavy since the 1st of December.
But you had the Mo from South Carolina coming in.
Well, we didn't get much of a bounce, and part of it was that he'd been on the air down there so long. And it was close. It was a very, very tough race in Florida. And yeah, Martinez and Chris
that weekend
helped us the last weekend.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mr. Buck, you said that Mitt Romney, the former Speaker of the House,
Newt Gingrich.
No,
Tip O'Neill.
could you explain why you said that? That isn't the case. That isn't what Mr. Gingrich himself.
The question is Newt Gingrich definitely running?
Well, I predict he's running, yeah.
That's not the question. You said definitely running.
Well, I think what I said is that Romney's in the race, Pawlenty's in the race, Gingrich is in the race. If you want to bet me a bunch of money that he's not, I'm happy to take the bet.
Okay. Yes, sir. Back there. Comparing anti-incumbent cycles with incumbent cycles, is that the question?
Yeah.
Anti-incumbent cycles we just had with the 3 back in the early 90s, how does that make 2012 compared to 96?
Okay. How does 2012 compare to 96?
That's a good question.
Well, look, a lot of these cycles had either an unpopular war or a real good or real bad economy. If the economy gets better and the majority of people think it's better and getting better, then yeah, it might look like 96 and you'd have a big Democratic win for president.
Well, go ahead, Larry.
I think it's just, hard. I think it's hard to sort of categorize even the most recent years as anti-incumbent, sort of in the same ways and for the same reasons. And I, you know, when we are coming up to a 2012, is the driving question on voters' mind going to be incumbency or anti-incumbency, sort of affirmation or throw the bums out? Is that really what's going to drive them? I don't know, but I sort of suspect it's a little more dimensional than that. As Charlie said, there's no question that people's vote is going to be affected by their economic mood. But the thing that I think, if I could just pick up on a couple of comments that were made, I know I said I wasn't going to try and get in the minor Republican primary voters, but I can't resist for just a second. That Ron's point that this doesn't go on under the dome anymore in the early states, in the early nominating states, I think really speaks to kind of what dynamic we're going to be facing in a general election. Because not only is it uncertain who the candidate, the Republican nominee will be, but whoever that is, I guarantee you this, it's somebody who's ultimately unknown right now to the American people. They have no idea what these prospective nominees stand for. How are they going to find out? They're going to find out as these guys audition, and women, audition themselves in front of Republican primary voters. And perhaps there's a path for somebody to do that while simultaneously appealing to the sensibilities of the middle of the electorate, and perhaps there isn't. But more than anything else that we don't know right now is kind of how is this person who ultimately is going to be going to emerge from a crowded and difficult primary, going to define himself or herself between now and then. And that's going to, there's two parts of the choice. One is they pretty much know what they think about President Obama. There'll be events between now and then. They'll continue to get to know him. But ultimately, they've had a chance to size him up, and there's not a lot of, going to be a lot of definitional, biographical advertising. I'll share that secret. But we don't have any idea what is going to be on the other side of the ledger. And we have, I think we can hypothesize about the third factor, which is the voters and what they're going to be demanding and basing their vote on. But we certainly don't have any certainty about that either.
I have a question over here.
With the GOP move to proportional representation, couldn't someone win with a lot of silver medals, or doesn't that at least keep the race going much more past just the first few races that we've seen in the past?
That's only a requirement. Proportional representation of the delegation is only a requirement if you hold your primary in March. So other than that, you can still do winner take all, which not every state does anyhow. But I think if the calendar sticks the way it's set now, you'll still have a de facto nominee, by mid to late April.
And I think there will be enormous pressure too within the party to get a nominee, because they're going to be facing this huge challenge in the White House. Everybody talks about the $1 billion candidate. I mean, that's the CW now, and I think there will be huge pressure if a candidate, Quinn, is taking silver after silver. Like, well, look, you're not winning anywhere. It's not happening. You want to drag it out and sort of, win silvers here and a bronze there and a silver again and sort of win a delegate war. The Republican establishment will get really, really antsy about settling on somebody when March comes around, because they're going to be facing this, very